The Committee of the Whole is called to order. We left off with Senator Nelson, who was yielded to the question from the Speaker. Has that been resolved, Senator Nelson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So in Chapter 6, Title 4 GCA, we have the 6203, subsection 6203 on the merit bonuses. And this is for superior performance by a classified employee in grades of A through B. So the question was, when the Hay study was implemented, did that stop the merit bonuses? And the answer is no. The merit bonuses are still in order. So they should still be getting their merit bonuses. What the amendment is based on is the area in 17 GCA Chapter 5, subsection 5121, which is the bonuses, rewards, and incentives program. And this states that notwithstanding any other provision of law, the Department of Education is hereby authorized to create a bonuses, rewards, and incentives programs for the recruitment and retention of teachers. So this goes specifically to the amendment that we are speaking to with the line item of $1 million. There is no documentation that we are able to find or have confirmed that because of the Hay study, the BRIP was discontinued. So and we reached out to GDOE. It is $1 million for the BRIP and $1 million for salary increments. So we're still trying to figure out the salary increments piece and how that was impacted or in effect. But the BRIP right now should still be consistent. And so GDOE informed us that it was $1 million for the BRIP program.
All right, so Senator Nelson, so on your amendment, is the word appropriate going to be changed to allocated?
Oh, thank you.
Within their budget?
Thank you for that. Yes, so we caught something in the amendment, and when it says appropriated, we would like to change the word appropriated to allocated.
Does any of my colleagues would like to speak to that, or if there's no objection to that correction that was identified, the word appropriated to allocated, we'll just move along with her amendment. Madam Speaker, did you have a comment you wanted to make on that one?
Well, I was speaking on the amendment, and I am in support of this amendment. If this is a program that's going to incentivize teachers to stay teaching despite the very tough challenges that they are facing right now, we have a critical need for teachers. We have excellent teachers for the most part, and I would like to do whatever we can to incentivize them to stay. So I agree with allocating part of this money towards this program. I just want to, if I could, make sure that this program remains open to teachers, not just those who had been awarded in the past, but other teachers to continue to apply, and that the rules are still still valid, I guess. If sponsor would just yield to that real quick, I'm in full support.
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chair. There is nothing that has discontinued the BRIP. The statute is still the same, and I don't think any one of us would like to go in there and change that statute. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. Does any other colleague would like to speak on the amendment? None? Are there any objection to the amendment? No objection. Senator Nelson, well, I don't know if I should just don't need to call a vote. You're not going to close. So there being no objection, amendment passes. Moving along, Senator Torres, you have your hand up, ma'am?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I had proposed to also include an amendment to page 19 that would follow, and I'm just waiting for it to be uploaded, but essentially it's along the same logic as the prior amendment, which would be to add a new section to section 19, to add a new section, and in this case it would be section 20 since the last one just passed, relative to nurse professional pay structure. And what I intend to do is at this point proffer an amendment for the sum of $871,000, the sum of $871,197 shall be allocated from the general fund on section 1 of this part of the chapter for the sole purpose of funding the nurse professional pay structure in fiscal year 2022. I am just awaiting it to be uploaded, but essentially, Mr. Chair, following your discussion on the last attempts to fund the nurse professional pay structure, as requested, it was told to me that those amounts are able to be absorbed by the agencies. So short of an allocation, a direct allocation for that purpose, I don't believe it can be accomplished. So my intent is to make an amendment so that it is actually appropriated, so that if there really is enough money to pay them, as you say there is, then it will be paid. So I don't see it on the drive, but if we can bookmark it.
We can bookmark it, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
There's no objection, there's an amendment floating in the air, so we'll bookmark that. And I think we're done with DOE, so we'll move to Senator Nelson.
Mr. Chair, can I just ask a question about the anticipated amendment? On GDOE, yes. Yes, that's correct. I just want to ensure that GDOE, that the appropriation for GDOE included the 15% salary increase in the bill, but it was just not stated. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the amendment will just make sure that it is written down. It's in their money, it's in their budget, it'll make sure they get it.
Okay.
And it'll be basically stated there in the budget.
That it's actually allocated and lawfully provided for, and that's
Yes,
what I'm trying to do.
in your amendment.
Thank you.
Senator.
Okay? But we'll bookmark that until the amendment comes in, just so we can make sure that's secured. We're now on still Chapter 2, but we're on the Guam Academy Charter School. I think Senator Nelson, I think is that you that have the amendment? I think that's an
Mr. Chair, I'd
amendment.
also like to, if I could, before we move to the charter schools, just raise a question on the GDOE Healthy Futures Fund allocations.
All right.
Yes,
Go ahead,
so
please.
If I'm reading it correctly, this is new, that GDOE is getting part of its funding from the Healthy Futures Fund this year. This amount, 607,000.
Okay, I'll have the OFB.
Yes, and I
make-
just wanted to
make comment.
confirm if we have met all the statutory obligations of this Healthy Futures Fund prior to this allocation.
All right,
For example, the statute says, of course, 15% to the Guam Cancer Trust Fund, 12% to the Guam Memorial Hospital, and 1 million also on top of that to the Guam Memorial Hospital, and then 72% gets appropriated by the legislature for other purposes such as this. So I just want to know if that's what you're tracking. It doesn't look like that to me.
yes, okay, we'll have the OFB. Mr. Guerrero?
If I understand your question correctly, you were asking whether or not this is the first time we're appropriating Healthy Future Fund to DOE or specifically for this particular project? Because, yeah, GDOE has been appropriated in the past from the Healthy Future Fund, but last year, the body decided not to fund the interscholastic program simply because of the COVID and the chances of them operating the program. So in that respect, we did not fund the interscholastic sports fund from the Healthy Future Fund, but DOE does get Healthy Future Fund monies.
Okay, so then is this, I guess I could talk about it during the GMH, but I'll bring it up at the GMH. I just want to see the allocation of the Healthy Futures if it meets what the statute requires.
All right, so you want to bookmark this just in case it come into question,
Sure.
right?
Okay, thank you.
All right, okay, we'll bookmark that. Good, we already have one bookmark on this chapter of DOE. Senator Paris, you have Do you have an amendment? Otherwise, we're gonna,
No,
or
no
a
amendment,
question?
but just a question to OFB regarding Section 7. So it basically appropriates money from the 2023 revenues for textbooks, and if you could explain how that is possible.
Yes, Senator Perez. If you recall, the way the textbooks appropriation is made in the Budget Act, and it's been there for, gosh, I can't even remember going back, is what we do is we identify future revenues of the preceding year. We set aside the one, in this case, it's 1.5 million. We set aside that amount from future, in this case, in 2022 revenues, and we allocate and we appropriate that money in the current budget year that we're budgeting for. So that's why you will see the appropriation here referencing the textbook, that the $1.5 million is being appropriated in FY22, but it's charged against FY23 revenues.
So considering this year, so what revenues were used for the textbooks?
FY22, 23.
So the general fund, you took it from the general fund?
It's like an advance to the general fund utilizing monies we anticipate to collect in future revenues. And this is how it's been done, Senator, for, gosh, I believe for the last 15, 20 years.
Has it been utilized to its fullest?
According to DOE, they are utilizing all the funds given to them. Whether or not they use it for textbooks, that I cannot attest.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. We will now move to the, remember, we bookmarked DOE, okay? So you can save it until we come back to that. But we're now moving to the charter school. Senator Nelson, I know you have an amendment for charter school that I'm... Senator Clint? Senator Nelson, do you have, we're on charter school, and I know I have an amendment
you,
too.
Mr. Chair.
To charter school, that I think that's,
Yes,
you might want me to address that.
thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, Mr. Chair, the first amendment that we have is labeled in the file, colleagues, as SB 55, TCN, line 19 through 20. And this is an amendment in section 2 on page 20. And this amendment reads, $496,000 is appropriated to Guam Academy Charter School Fund from the Healthy Futures Fund. Earlier in the budget, we increased the special fund revenue of Healthy Futures Fund. And so we did check with legal to confirm that Healthy Futures Fund can also be used for charter schools. And in this amendment, we are including an increase. The charter schools have asked for an increase from $6,150 to $6,200 per enrollee. And the thing is that we all know that it takes, there was a calculation several years back that it costs $11,000 per student in Guam Department of Education. And a lot of the students are also availing to the programs of the charter school. So we are looking to, what's going on? We are looking to increase the amount per enrollee to $6,200, and then we are also increasing the enrollment. I spoke with the Charter School Council Chair, and the charter schools are asking for an increased enrollment because for several years now they have been enrolling students above the required or prescribed amount in the budget law. And so we're trying to right-size it this year by giving them the enrollment amounts that they asked for. And so the change in the enrollment amount is for the Guam Academy Charter Schools not to exceed 740 students, and iLearn not to exceed 765. And I humbly ask your support.
Does any of my colleague would like to speak to this amendment to increase the, Senator Paris?
Yeah, just, it was stated iLearn, but is it Science is Fun and Awesome, according to the amendment?
No, it's based on the amendment. It's identifying specifically, Guam County's appropriation of iLearn to 740 from 700, and then Guam Academy from 740 to 765. It's very specific to the two schools.
Maybe just a clarification for the proffer of the amendment. Is the change meant for Science is Fun and Awesome, or is it for iLearn Academy?
The information we received for those that were seeking enrollment increases was for the Guam Academy Charter School and iLearn.
The amendment itself says students, the change is actually happening to CIFA, unless I got the wrong
I
amendment.
think you're looking at the wrong amendment,
Okay, my
Senator.
apologies. I don't have the right amendment.
No, we're not. As a matter of fact, let's take a quick recess, because my understanding, I think it was supposed to be career tech, we're supposed to be an adjusting, if I'm correct.
What did you say, Mr. Chair?
We'll take a quick recess. Committee of the Whole is called to order. We return from recess. Senator Nelson, you still have the floor on your amendment. If we can go ahead and finish
Okay.
up on your amendment so we can have the
Sure.
colleagues speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It seems that there was some confusion. Colleagues, the file name for the amendment, it's in Chapter 2, is SB 55-TCN L19 through 20, page 20. And so just to reiterate, we increased the Healthy Futures Fund to $700,000, and this is a portion of the Healthy Futures Fund of the increase to go for increasing the charter school appropriation to $496,000, an additional $496,000, which covers the increase in enrollment for iLearn Academy to 740 students, and Guahan Academy to 765. I just want to ensure, Mr. Chair, that the clerks and OFB is able to make the necessary changes to the calculations of the 496 for what is the total given to the charter schools. So whatever they received from the general fund on top of the 496 for their total to be adjusted.
They'll make the adjustment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Does any of my colleagues like to speak to this amendment? Senator Nelson, sir.
I am not as good looking as Senator Nelson.
I apologize, Senator Duenas. See what happens when I apologize, sir.
I can only wish I had a pretty face like that. I guess that means I support the amendment. Real quickly, Mr. Chairman, I cannot think of a better use of the Healthy Futures. There are a lot of great uses for the Healthy Futures Fund. You know, when the Healthy Futures Fund came into being, I was actually Director of Youth Affairs, and one of the things that we always would talk about in terms of making sure that we have prevention programs for our young people. That was a lot of the issue, because a lot of the reason for the Healthy Futures Funds, obviously we derive the revenue from, what we call sin taxes, things that might be adverse to our health. And education, and particularly with the charter schools, when they're performing to their level, and these children generally have a stronger path towards working on vocational and career tech ed kind of opportunities and the like. And it's just another program that generally gets most of our young people on track, where they really know where they're going, and opportunities for a great education that translates into job opportunities and a future that they can look forward to. And that was, other than the direct benefits of taking care of course, those who are ill, those who need assistance as well under the Healthy Futures Fund, a lot of this was prevention programs. And I want to continue to applaud the author and others who look at funding educational opportunities that are showing strong results, and that truly are appropriate to the name Healthy Futures Fund as far as prevention programs. So education is the greatest prevention program. Training is the greatest prevention program, simply because our young people, when they have these opportunities, they tend to make better decisions, and that is research-based information that you can always get from Department of Youth Affairs and other youth programs, prevention programs. So I rise in support of this, and I appreciate the author, Jesus Masi.
Thank you, Senator Duenas. Does any other colleague would like to speak to this amendment? Senator Tello.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to look at the funding here, the numbers here from the 11,439,000. I guess it was stated early that there are going to be some corrections to those numbers from the 496.
No, it's when you add the 496, then that's the increase. Then it will change from 11,439 to 11,900 and
So it's like
35.
1,505 students, correct, total? Or is that more than that? We're just looking at these particular charter schools. Because right now I'm adding the 740 and the 765 together. It's coming out to 1,505. And
Right.
is that equivalent to the increase of 496?
I'm gonna
Can you do
ask
some math?
the author to
Thank you.
yield to that question.
It's like 65 additional students, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, so let me just give a whole breakdown. If you look into Chapter 2 on page 20 of the original bill, you'll see that in line 15 that the schools were awarded $61.50 per enrollee.
Right.
What the Charter School Council is requesting to meet the needs of all the charter schools is that we increase the $61.50 by $50 to $6,200 per enrollee, which is basically half of what we appropriate for GDOE per student. GDOE, we appropriate over $11,000. And the second request that they had was to increase enrollment for specific schools that have exceeded their enrollment and have been operating for several years now, exceeding their required enrollment in the bills that we have been passing under the Budget Act. And so we are increasing that to $765 for Guahan Academy Charter School and $740 for the iLearn Academy Charter School. So if we take the amount of the $6,200, which was the $50 per enrollee increase, so we're including $50 for each student, to include the enrollment increase to these two schools, the total amount will come up to $496,000.
Can I take a short break because
We'll
these
take a
numbers are
recess.
different? Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Committee of the Whole is called back to order. Senator Tello, was your issues resolved, ma'am?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. I thank you for the opportunity for me to ask OFB some questions. I think it was easier to understand actually the total number of students in charter schools. That helps when you're calculating the numbers to determine this increase. And I would have to gone back into the bill, calculated all the numbers for all the other schools, and then the additional 65 that's been incorporated in there. I've been a great advocate, Mr. Chair, of charter schools. I believe it works. It's proven itself time and time again. You look at these students coming out with higher test grades than most public schools. You're finding that they're also basically going into certain fields that students keep their attention to, like if they're into anything that has to do with electronics or, you know, in that line of field of study. And it keeps these students engaged. And I really appreciate all the hard work that these teachers, who actually, they don't get paid as well as, you know, DOE teachers or other teachers from the military schools or DODEA schools. You can tell that there's a great heart in wanting to teach these students to grow and to be better. And I greatly appreciate this amendment. I too was approached that there was an increase in student enrollment. And I know, Mr. Chair, that you did accommodate this, but as time goes on, when school opens up, you're finding more and more students come aboard. So I greatly appreciate this increase and thank the author of this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Does any other colleague would like to speak to this amendment? There being none, Senator, Madam Speaker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have no objection to the increase the number of students for these charter schools, if this is based on recommendation of the Charter Schools Council, that they're meeting all their obligations to the students. And I'm asking your staff at OFB just to confirm this 11,000 per DOE. They say this 11,000 per DOE student includes federal funds. I'm just thinking it is really increased since when the charter schools concept first came into place. And so I just wanted to get a handle on the, where are we going with this? Yeah, how are we going to proceed with DOE per student cost versus charter schools, right? I know I don't want to decrease from the pressure on DOE to increase its test results, to increase everything that it's supposed to be doing, right? And make sure that they can come up with the results just as much. And I think it's clear it's not necessarily based on cost per student that we're going to get those types of results. And that's what the charter schools are kind of showing us here. My only issue with this amendment, and it's a small amount of money, 496, and I know that, this, we have increased the Healthy Futures Fund estimate to accommodate this. But my only issue is that when I was looking at the Healthy Futures Fund, it looks like we have not followed the statute, not just in not giving the correct proportion of the Healthy Futures Fund to the Guam Cancer Trust Fund, but we haven't given the 12% to the Guam Memorial Hospital either. And or the $1 million. And so I just wanted to note that. I have no objection to this, but I'm concerned. I don't like the idea of not following the existing statutes of how we're going to allocate this Healthy Futures Fund. And so I want, when we get to GMH, to address that as well in public health. And if I could, so I think they said now, cost for DOE student, if you take away federal funds, is about, from our local funding sources, is about $7,527 per student. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Does any of my colleagues would like to speak to the amendment? If not, I'll ask Senator Nelson to close her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, within the light of the events of the past year, we've seen COVID have an impact on our educational system. Yes. And many times, some of the challenges were we weren't even able to find our students so that they can have a proper education. And so we had a lot of students in the enrollment that we were unable to reach out and ensure that they received continued education through that year. And so, Mr. Chair, I humbly ask my colleagues for their support on this amendment, because now we're doubling the effort. Now that we're able to go back into schools, we're trying to double the effort to bring them back, to encourage them to, especially their parents, to come back and to ensure that their children's education is put at the forefront. And so I ask my colleagues for their support. This is our future. they're going to fill the seats that we fill today, and so let's give them that chance. Let's provide for them that superior education that we ourselves experienced growing up. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. Are there any objection to this amendment? There is none. That being known and recognized, this motion will pass as introduced. We'll now proceed to University of Guam.
Okay, the next amendment is an amendment by Senator San Augustine, and it is to page 26. Is that correct, Senator San Augustine?
That's correct. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My colleagues, this amendment is technical in nature to ensure we make the proper allocation appropriated to G3 and C grant programs at the university. You'll find on your drive, there's 3 amendments. And I have to go one at a time, where I split up. We'll just go down one at a time. You'll find that on line 8, page 26, to amend the bill to read, Section 12, Guam Green Growth G3 Initiative, the sum of what is on the bill of $1 million to $500,000 is allocated from the general fund appropriation in Section 2. This amendment will basically split the initial allocation on the G3. This will just cover the $500,000 that they need at G3 initiative. Senator knows? Oh, no. Mr. Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Nelson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you just reiterate where the amendment, what is the file name for the amendment?
The amendment is Section 12 there, to reduce the amount to
What page?
G3 initiative.
What page?
It's page 26, line 8.
Okay. Thank you.
Senator San Augustine, are you finished discussing the amendment?
I just wanted to reiterate to my colleagues that we're reducing the amount for G3, but reallocating that funds to another program that the university is doing. And the information is available on the drive, is a letter received from President Christ of UG that outlined the importance of specific allocation for the C grant. And that'll be on the next amendment that I identified.
Okay, thank you, Senator San Augustine. Anyone on this amendment? Speaker Terlahi, you're recognized.
Just looking at the UOG's budget, it looks like for DOE, we reduced their budget by about $2 million from FY21, but for UOG, we're increasing their budget by about $1.5 million from FY21. And I guess part of this Well, it's just an allocation, so I don't have any objection to this amendment to reducing the allocation. Yeah, I just wanted to know what the 1.5 million increase represents for UOG.
Is the question for OFB?
Yes, please.
Yes, Senator. The increase that you're showing here, actually, if you look at the bottom line of GOG, it's 1 million less than the governor's request. But if you're comparing to FY21 appropriation, then the increase can be attributed to the
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please state your point of order.
Mr. Chair, we are currently in an amendment. I think that while that conversation and the discussion is valid, as it brings up a valid concern, I think that just for proper protocol and procedure, that we dispose of that amendment before we move into that discussion, because it's got no germaneness to the discussion of the amendment.
Duly noted. Thank you, Senator Blas. Speaker Talahi, do you have a question that's specific to the amendment?
No.
Okay. Any other comments on this specific amendment? Would anyone else like to discuss the amendment? If not, Senator San Augustine, you may close.
No need, just move to vote.
Are there any objections to the amendment? Seeing none, motion carries. Senator San Augustine, you have another amendment, this one to line 3 of page 27. You're recognized.
Yes, Mr. Chair. To amend the bill to read, as you go down it's to strike out after the National Science Foundation Guam Established Program, strike out and UOG Sea Grant Program. And then it'll continue on, and then double underline programs and other grants after stimulated competitive research. That's the amendment.
Okay, there's an amendment offered by Senator San Augustine to line 3 of page 27. Would anyone like to speak on the amendment? Senator Atta, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The author would yield on the program. What or other grants? What other grants in particular were he looking at for this funding? And yeah.
Does the author yield?
Yes, Senator, I think on my next amendment, when I identified the Sea Grant, that's why I took it out of this section, because we're going to add amend the bill to add the Sea Grant portion where the other 500K would go. And that's why we're trying to just itemize it specifically.
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Atta. Anyone else on the amendment? Senator San Augustine, you may close.
Not required. We could just move to vote.
Any objections to this amendment? No objections. Motion carries. Senator San Augustine, you're recognized for your next amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You'll find on my last amendment is actually to add a new section 21 to part 3 of chapter 2 to the bill, and is to read. Section 21, Sea Grant Program. The sum of $500,000 is allocated from the general fund appropriation in section 2 of this part of the chapter to the University of Guam's Sea Grant Special Fund, established through Public Law 35114 for fiscal year 2022 to fund the Sea Grant Program for the sole purpose of supporting the Sea Grant Program administered by the University of Guam for island sustainability. The UG has been a land-grant institution since 1972. The status brought significant opportunities for the University of Guam and the region in agriculture, terrestrial resource management, and development of the community. Having received a formal notice of review from the National Sea Grant Director, the UG now has a once-in-a-generation opportunity to achieve Sea Grant status and bring similar opportunities to Guam and the region in marine resource management, environmental stewardship, and the community development of coastal communities. The National Sea Grant Program is a partnership between universities and the federal government's National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, an agency within the Department of Commerce. UOG Sea Grant applies research, extension, and educational activities that sustain and develop island environments while integrating the knowledge and culture of island people. UOG Sea Grant provides local workforce development training in marine and environmental science through research funding, internship, fellowship, and grants and funds. That would be the end of that. But a further information about the Sea Grant. The investment we are making in the 500K to G3 and the Sea Grant program will work as matching funds for grant programs that will award up to $1 million for the Sea Grant program and will help Guam achieve the Sea Grant institution status. The grant funding received will assist in providing support for personnel, supplies, equipment, programming, and building space, and other support for the Sea Grant program. And I just ask my colleagues for their support.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine. Just to be clear, this amendment is to line 26 of page 29. Is that correct? Page 29?
Mr. Chairman, there was a back page also in my amendment. I just didn't read it. But if you want, I can continue reading it. It's
Go
about
ahead.
half a page. Okay, it says on the very front, funds, research competitions among faculty, colleges, and nonprofit organizations to promote understanding and better management of coastal resources in Guam and Micronesia, and perpetuate traditional local knowledge in navigation and fishery through teaching, research, outreach, and apprenticeship. The expenditure authorized in this section shall be used for UG Sea Grant operation and administrative costs, hiring of faculty and administrative staff, facility improvement and supplies and equipment. The sum appropriate herein is authorized for use as a local matching requirement for grants and aid and shall be prioritized for use as the local matching requirement to achieve and maintain Sea Grant institutional status, which has the potential to garner 1 to 2 federal grant contributions of up to $1 million in federal funds to the University of Guam per year. The President of the University of Guam will post on UOG website and shall submit to Imagahaga Guahan and the Speaker of the Legislature in Guam in the Microsoft Excel file and written report, annual reports of the UOG Sea Grant Special Fund. At a minimum, said report shall include program mission statement, objectives, source of revenue, expenditures by budget classification, number of employees and contracts, and shall describe program accomplishment in fiscal year reported. Whew.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine. Anyone on the amendment to line 26 of page 29 proffered by Senator San Augustine? Senator Blas, you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, before...
I'm sorry,
Senator Blas,
one moment, Senator Blas, if I could allow Senator San Augustine.
if they can make the technical correction, there may be some misspell on the amendment. I think we put
That's
off
a
and it's
long
for.
technical correction there, Primo.
So there's a motion to also include technical corrections to this amendment. Okay, Senator Blas, you're recognized.
I just, the proffer of the amendment can yield to the question, and this has been a discussion that we've had over the last couple of weeks or last month with regards to, when we provide funding for grants and stuff and recognizing that there's going to be personnel costs, equipment costs and whatnot. What does this then, how does this impact us in the future? Now, granted, we're going to get a grant now, but then is it going to be a cost for us in the future that we're going to have to sustain?
Senator San Augustine, do you yield to the question?
Well, yes, and it's like any other grant or any other federal support we get when there's a requirement for a matching. And it's one to, it's 1 to 2. We give 500,000, we get $1 million in grant. As long as we maintain the program, then we will continue with the grant. If we don't, then I don't see that money going to the University of Guam for any other purpose, other than what it was intended on the Sea Grant.
Senator Blas?
Thank you. And follow-up question to that then is, what is the cost share on this grant?
Senator San Augustine, do you yield?
We provide 500K and the grant will be for $1 million.
And then next year, what is that going to be now, the cost share?
Maybe the OFB can answer that.
Yes, please.
Yes, Senator. My understanding, the way this grant works, it's kind of like 2 for 1. If we put up $1, federal government will match it with $2. So what it is that we initially have to come up with the kind of like our share first, and once we secure our share, then I guess the university can move forward and apply for the grant. If we don't apply for the grant, then either we pay it out of the general fund totally, because I understand it's not a partial type of request. Either you match it or you don't. And if your follow-up question is what happens next year, it might be the same thing. Normally, grants like this, the funding ratios do not change. And if they do, they'll notify us way in advance to give us at least a proper notification to decide whether or not we want to continue with these programs, or just kind of like come to a point where we just say after the grant ends, the program normally ends. Historically, the way it is in Gov Guam is that when we do apply for federal dollars, one of the things that we need to take into account, especially locally, is that these federal dollars are intended to fund a program. Once the program ends, it is assumed that once the funding, the federal dollar ends, it is assumed the program will also end. But a lot of times we find ourselves just basically covering the program, continuously funding it with local dollars, and that's where it gets kind of tough.
No, I appreciate it. So this is consistently now 2 for 1 as opposed to declining in as far as cost share, or in our case, our rising cost share. This is a 2 for 1 consistent.
From my understanding, that is the way the program funding level works, yes.
Yeah. And again, thank you, Mr. Chair. The concern here is, eventually, is this going to be a program that we're going to have to fund, all on our own? And we don't have that. Do we have that ability to do that? So with that, Mr. Chair, I support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blas. Anyone else on the amendment? Senator Atta, you're recognized.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question with the OFB. Since this grant is for the sole purpose of supporting the Sea Grant program administered by UOG, should they not get approved for that grant, what happens to the $500,000? Does that revert back to the general fund?
Normally, Senator, what happens is that whenever the legislature appropriates funding for a specific program, that program normally the funding is reserved for that program. Unless we're given any other authority to utilize those funds for any other purpose, it normally would stay as an appropriation for that program. I do believe there is language in the law, in our bill that authorizes, I believe, the president to utilize available funding for him. That's available for him for transfer.
Senator San Augustine, do you have something to add to the question?
Yes. I just want to recognize that this will help the University of Guam reach Sea Grant institutional status. It'll raise their level, and we hope for the success of the grant application so they can get the $1 million to help University of Guam pursue the Sea Grant program. It's like the land grant status, where it just multiplies on its own.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, can I just make one clarification? There is a section on page 29, section 18, that authorizes the transfer of operation funds by the university president to cover for statutory mandates, including scholarship programs, exclusive of administrative costs contained in Chapter 3 of the appropriation.
Thank you for that. Then my question now to follow up on that is then, if we're appropriating it for the sole purpose, and then in this section, it just gives the transfer authority, then what's to say that they may not even fund this program? I mean, we're giving them the authority for this sole purpose, and then in the next section, we're giving them the transfer authority to utilize it for other purposes as well. So how is it that we keep it just for that program?
The key here, Senator, is because this specific program is a specific appropriation made to the project. Unlike when we talk about operations, the dollar amount for operation is capitalized in one general amount for university operations. So this in itself, since it's a separate appropriation, this is not really considered an operation type of funds. So this, if the project doesn't move forward, I think these monies will remain within UOG.
So, but would the funding remain for the purpose of this program?
Until such time the program is initiated, it should stay with UOG.
And should not be transferred out of this program, because it's for the sole purpose of this program.
And that is my understanding how the appropriation is being written.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ada. Anyone else on the amendment? Senator San Augustine, you may close.
I just ask my colleagues to support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine. Any objections to the amendment? No objections, motion carries.
Mr. Chair?
We will go to a quick recess. Or you have a question, Senator Ada?
Yeah, just a quick, are we ready to close this chapter though, or?
Not yet. That's why I'm going to go to recess because one of our colleagues has asked a question that I want to try to get resolved with the OFB so that we can take care of another part in the University of Guam. All
Okay,
right? So
thank you,
just a
Mr.
quick
Chair.
recess. Thank you. Committee of the Whole is back to order, but we will recess until 1:30 so that we can get some of the information out and be prepared for 1:30. All right? So recess to 1:30.